This is Tough Lung at Gaming Motherfucker. Fuck you and your wife. And fuck your mom and eat your dog and cat.
And unresponsive. He called the emergency services and paramedics arrived to the property, but they were unable to revive her. A verdict of accidental death was recorded. The tragedy occurred just as Pauline was reportedly contemplating retiring so that she could spend more time with her husband. Number 8. Incident in Sydney. In June of 2021, an Australian man suffered life-threatening injuries while cutting a tree with a chainsaw in Sydney South. Emergency services arrived at Canterbury Grove shortly after 9 a.m. and were forced into haste action in order to save his life. The unnamed 32-year-old had been part of a group tasked with felling a tree in the area. His chainsaw suddenly kicked back, which is one of the most common and dangerous aspects of operating the power tool. A kickback occurs when the chain abruptly comes to a halt and forcefully throws the saw back towards the operator. The rapidly rotating blades plunged into the man's neck. He was bleeding profusely from a deep laceration and had also suffered cuts to his arm. 2 teams of paramedics worked together and managed to stabilize him before he was transported to St. George Hospital. Number 7. Bill Singleton. On May the 6th of 2016, Australian man Bill Singleton willed himself through surviving a harrowing chainsaw accident in which his face was split open. The 68-year-old was working at his property in Ballarat when he lost control of the power tool. It went into his head, cutting through his lower jaw. Singleton was unable to call for an ambulance because his tongue had been sliced in half. He got into his car and started driving to the nearest hospital. After wrapping his head together with bandages, Singleton reached the medical facility's car park but collapsed to his knees and recognized that he was starting to pass out. He forced himself to get back and reached the entrance. He was quickly airlifted to Royal Melbourne Hospital, where doctors determined that he'd cut into his head as far back as his wisdom teeth. The chainsaw had knocked out a few of his teeth, but fortunately stopped before reaching the carotid artery or the larynx. One of Singleton's doctors compared treating the injury to a gunshot wound, commenting on the dangers of operating a chainsaw. Near the man, Mal Wilhelm, nearly died after the tree he was cutting changed direction and fell on him, pushing the chainsaw he was operating into his body. The 52-year-old was cutting the tree for firewood on his remote Chittering property when he found himself crushed beneath the weight of the tree. It took the paramedics 3 hours to reach him, a time during which Wilhelm wasn't sure that he was going to survive as he could feel his lung filling up with blood. Aside from the lacerations inflicted by the power tool, Wilhelm also suffered broken legs, a fractured spine, and a compressed ribcage. He was taken to the Royal Perth Hospital and placed in intensive care. He had a special filter inserted into his veins to stop a blood clot from migrating into his lungs. The device that ultimately saved his life measured roughly 25 millimeters and had prongs reaching out from the center of the filter. Its successful application was used as an example in a study that looked to widen its use with patients suffering from extreme trauma. Today's topic was requested by Sigmatic Cartel, Hypo 2007, and Case Pro. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Melengi Gwala. On March the 6th of 2018, triathlete Melengi Gwala was the victim of a horrific attack that occurred while he was training near Durban, South Africa. 3 men pulled him from his bike, held him at gunpoint, and dragged him into some bushes. Then, using a chainsaw, they tried to cut off his legs below the knee. It's believed to have been a targeted attack, deliberately meant to cripple him ahead of the national championships, which were due to start in 10 days' time. Even after Gwala had given the assailants his wallet and cell phone, they continued to cut through his right calf. They got about halfway through, damaging his muscles, nerves, and bone before moving to his left leg. Guala would recall that the men spoke in a language he didn't understand. They ultimately relinquished the attack, and it's believed that they'd only done so because the chainsaw was too blunt to finish the job. In agony, Guala crawled to the road where he flagged down a car and was taken to a local hospital. Doctors believed that his legs could be saved. A crowdfunding effort was initiated, aiming to get Belengi back on his bike, while the full scope of the motive for the attack remains unknown, as does the identity of his attackers. Number 1. Incident in Romania. In the winter of 2016, an unnamed 49-year-old Romanian man was cutting firewood in a village of Iasi County, located in the country's northeast. He called a neighbor to help him, and they shared a few alcoholic drinks before starting the chore. He warned his 53-year-old friend to be careful while operating the chainsaw. Then, as a joke, the neighbor lunged forward with the power tool in hand as simultaneously the other man stepped forward. The chainsaw ended up in his groin and tore apart the father of three's genitals. His wife suddenly saw him covered in blood and called for an ambulance. The victim was rushed to the hospital, where doctors were able to stabilize his condition and struggled to save as much of his manhood as they could. The man survived, but the future implications of his injury remain unclear. His wife stated that she intended to press charges against the neighbor, who was distraught in the aftermath, insisted that he was only trying to make a joke. Thanks for watching. Would you rather use a chainsaw blindfolded or only walk backwards for an entire week? Let us know in the comment section below. Number 9. Lauren Scruggs. On December the 3rd of 2011, Lauren Scruggs took to the skies above McKinney, Texas, in a single-engine plane piloted by her friend. They'd planned to see the Christmas lights from the air. As she steps off the aircraft in the dark, Scruggs walked towards the front of the wing and was struck by its still spinning propeller. The blade struck her in the head and sliced off her left hand, causing her to collapse in a pool of blood. The 22-year-old also suffered a brain injury, and her left eye subsequently had to be removed. Doctors were initially unsure she was going to survive, but she made a remarkable recovery, eventually being fitted with a prosthetic eye and hand. Within a year, she returned to work as the editor of the fashion publication Lolo magazine. She released 2 books, with the first detailing how the accident had impacted her life. The link to both books is available in the description below. Scruggs was unsure the extent to which her injuries Calgary to Grand Prairie. During takeoff, the Q400 twin-engine turboprop blew a tire and was unable to turn back or continue to its destination. As a result, it crash-landed in Edmonton, about 200 miles north from where it had departed. When the aircraft hit the ground, the landing gear collapsed on the right side. Consequently, one of its propellers came loose and sliced through the cabin. Carrillo was struck by the blade in the head after it breached the wall. Amazingly, she survived the blow. A friend who was on the same flight noted that she sustained a huge head lump, along with multiple bruises and scratches. Carrillo was treated for a concussion as one of 4 passengers to be hospitalized at the University of Alberta Hospital in the crash's aftermath. Number 1. Ivan Andres Lopez Londoño. In April of 2018, a helicopter crashed in Colombia's southwestern Cauca district following technical difficulties. It was carrying valuable equipment, and roughly a week later, a second helicopter was dispatched to the area on a recovery mission. It had made 4 successful visits, but the 5th went horrifically wrong. Maintenance manager Ivan Andres Lopez Londoño was on the ground, directing the aircraft's approach. A video captured during the recovery mission showed the moment that the helicopter suddenly started to overturn. As it approached the side, Londoño was in the path of its propeller and was brutally mowed down. He sustained devastating injuries and was pronounced bruising.
This is Tough Lung at Gaming, motherfucker. Fuck you and your wife. And fuck your mom and eat your dog and cat.